Hello, this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. Welcome back to Hausfrau Friday. This is a weekly segment where I talk about how the three permaculture ethics of earth care, hi Athena, people care, and fair share interplay with our familial relationships and with the home. Now, I get a lot of requests to talk about parenting and unschooling. So I talked a little bit about unschooling last week, and I want to talk a little bit more about non-authoritarian and non-coercive parenting this week. You may not be a parent, and that's okay. These techniques are really important, and the way we relate to kids through this lens is really important, whether or not you have children. Because kids are part of society, kids are people, and they have unique needs and unique capabilities amongst humans. So my dog will stop circling. I think she's gonna lay down now. So before I get into this video, I know folks are gonna ask me about this. So every day when I'm posting a TikTok, I'll get at least one comment, why is your clock broken? Did you know your clock's not working? It works great. I stop it for filming because the pendulum ticking is pretty darn loud and distracting. So yeah, it totally works. This is a clock that was in a bank in rural Indiana that my grandma used to work in, and it was painted black. It originally was oak like this, and then someone, some point in like the 40s or 50s, painted it black. And my dad painstakingly stripped it and restored it to the original oak, put a new mechanism in it, got it working again. And this is my favorite clock, and it was my grandma's. Okay, so let's get into the topic of today's video. So first off, if you don't know, I have a TikTok. It is growing rapidly. I think I'm up to over 6,000 followers in a week. And I've been talking a lot about parenting. That's because the permaculture ethic of people care is applicable to all people, and kids have unique developmental circumstances and unique abilities that mean that we need special skills or special understanding that a lot of us in our age stratified society really lack. And so my sister stopped by, so I had to stop filming, and now a storm is rolling in. So it's getting darker and darker, but we're going to power through. Okay, so what was I saying? Children have unique developmental capabilities compared to adults, right? They're in process, their brains are immature, their bodies are immature, and that means that it takes specific skills to relate to them well. And we live in a society where kids are really partitioned off from adults. They're partitioned off into daycare and preschool and public school, and then like they have very limited interaction in most adult spaces with non-parents, and even with their own parents, it's fairly limited. And a lot of us were really raised in a situation where, and I've been talking about this on my TikTok, where we had kind of, toxic and unhealthy relationships with our parents, especially those of us of my generation, Gen X/millennial. I'm a Zennial, born like right in between the generations. And so we often didn't learn really good communication skills with children or even really understand child development very well. And at the end of this video, I'll cut in a couple of TikToks talking about those issues. A little bonus at the end, if you will. Okay, so when we're talking to kids, it helps to know how their brains work, what their limitations are, and what is appropriate, what our expectations need to be, right? There's a lot of straight up authoritarian dictating to children what they must do, whether or not they want to do it, they need to do it, whether or not it makes them safe or puts them at risk, right? And whether or not it honors their actual level of development and is appropriate for them. There's also a lot of coercive parenting where we have this artificial construct, like maybe we're giving kids choices, but it's just to manipulate them into doing what we want. If you are an evangelical or a former evangelical and you took a parenting with love and logic course, that was coercive parenting. That was acting like you were setting up options for your kids, but you really were forcing them into a scenario where they had to do what you wanted. And kids are no fools. They realize that there is no actual real choice. It's the illusion of a choice. Coercive parenting can also be threatening kids, threatening to punish them, to withhold things that they need or belong to them. Any form of parenting that uses punishment is coercive. And I think that like a significant portion of my viewers are not in the United States. And so that kind of parenting may seem really strange to you, but it's very normalized in America. Authoritarian, coercive, often with disrespecting a child's bodily autonomy and hitting them. And that is not how we parent. I have never hit my kids. We don't coerce them. We're non-authoritarian. And so I keep getting lots of questions from folks like, what does it mean to parent without punishment? What does that look like? And please, I'll keep plugging my TikTok here. I talk about this a lot on TikTok. So, that short form format is a great place to learn little bits about non-authoritarian parenting.
Can you effectively parent kids without punishment? My name is Angela. I am the parent of 4 children, ages 21, 19, almost 16, and almost 13. We are non-authoritarian parents, and we do not practice punishment. Now, Beatha here misrepresented my position multiple times on this post. We don't hit our kids, including spanking, which is hitting. We don't ground them. We don't take away their possessions, etc., etc. We don't shame them. We don't put them in timeout. We don't use punitive and coercive parenting. But Beatha here is conflating punishment and correction when they are 2 different things. We correct our kids all of the time, but I think the way you're using correction here might be a euphemism for hitting them or punishing them in some other way. Correcting our kids looks like, oh, hey Hal, you forgot to clear your dishes to the sink. Or it might be, hey, my dude, dishes, sink. It's not clear your dishes or else. It's not, are you so lazy you can't clear your dishes? It's not, if Hal forgets to clear his dishes, I come back and say, you know what, you forgot to clear your dishes, therefore I'm going to take away your iPad for 15 minutes. You need to learn a lesson. It's not, you didn't clear your dishes, so I'm going to smack you on the bottom. It's a correction. It's a reminder. It's, hey, you know what, I'm going to clue you into the fact that you didn't fulfill your obligation here. That's it. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. So no, we don't use any punishment, but we do use lots of correction and guidance. That's what parenting is, teaching our kids how to be human beings in a family with other people and in community with other people. It's teaching our children healthy expectations, healthy habits, healthy communication. It's empowering them to be fully functional adults with good boundaries. And that does not require punishment.
So first off, one of the things that authoritarian parenting does, coercive parenting, is it really damages the trust between a parent and a child. Kids who are parented with authoritarian parenting know they're being manipulated, and they also don't trust their parents to prioritize their needs and wants. And they know that when they make very normal childlike mistakes or they make poor decisions, that they will be punished. And so there's an incentive in authoritarian parenting to hide and sneak and to not trust your parent to be there when you need them. But also the goal becomes avoiding punishment rather than learning correct behavior, learning empathetic, appropriate, self-regulated behavior. And so when we practice authoritarian parenting, when we make threats, if you don't do what I want, then I will ground you. If you don't do this thing I'm demanding of you, then I will hit you. What we're doing is we're teaching kids to engage in behaviors to avoid punishment. We're not actually getting kids to learn empathy. We're not getting them to think on their own. We're not getting them to understand how to relate to other people in the world in any way except through the lens of threats and punishment. It really limits a kid's ability to make their own good choices. I know for myself as a child, a lot of my motivation as a teenager was, how do I avoid punishment? How do I sneak and lie and try to skirt around punishment because I felt like a lot of it was really unjust. Like, I know I've done this very normal thing and screwed up, and I know I'm going to get punished for it. So my brain really worked on developing skills to avoid punishment rather than developing skills to make good choices for myself. And I had a lot of catch up to do after that. It also produces a lot of anxiety for kids to be in that dynamic where they're very fight or flight. They're very much, how do I avoid being hurt? Okay, so let's talk about chores really quickly, because this is a big one where I see that parents really bring in punishment. Like, if you don't do chores, they either use chores as punishment, which is wild because everybody has to take care of a home, and making it seem like punishment instead of just a normal part of life is like not a great way to teach kids to take care of their home. But also I see parents punishing kids because they don't do chores well or they forget to do them. Now, first of all, if you want kids to do chores well, you have to do chores with them. You have to bring kids alongside you and show them and explain to them what you're doing. Hey, when we clean the bathtub, we take the baking soda and we pour it onto the lemon, and that makes a mild abrasive that helps us scrub out the bathtub. And we don't have to use super caustic cleaners, but we do want to have an abrasive to help clean out the tub. And here's how we do it. And then here's how we rinse it out when we're done. Okay. Or, hey, we're learning how to wash dishes. We want to make sure that we use really hot water and soap because we need hot water and soap to help break up and release the grease from our dishes. It's really hard to get dishes clean if the water's not really hot and it's not really soapy. Also, we want to make sure that we're washing the inside of the dish and the outside of the dish. Like, that's parenting, right? So if we don't teach our kids how to do it, like, they'll figure it out on their own eventually, maybe, but why be a parent if you aren't there to want to teach your kids? Okay, so in our household, we talk about what the range of chores are that need to be done, and folks are allowed to opt out of certain chores. Like, I have chores that I hate. I don't like doing the dishes by hand. It's really hard on my hands. I have to do dishes a lot, but my husband has taken over doing most of the dishes because he doesn't mind. And so if I can pass that chore off to somebody else, I would gladly take on a different chore. Everybody in life has preferences, and it's okay if you have a chore that you're like, you know what, I hate doing this. Would someone be willing to swap me? So we talk about what chores folks want to do, what chores they enjoy doing or dislike less than other chores, and we try to meet each other's needs that way. Everybody still has to do some chores they don't want to do. So let's take George, for example. He's almost 13. One of his chores is dusting the living room every week and the front sunroom. Except he doesn't dust Ruth's plants. Those are off limits. Those are for Ruth alone. Okay, so George has to dust every week. He has agreed that's a chore he's willing to take on. He does it on his own. And technically by age 13, he shouldn't need to be reminded. So what happens if George forgets to do his dusting or he does it really half-assed? Well, in authoritarian parenting, it would go like this. You haven't done your dusting yet. If you don't do it by 4 o'clock, I'm going to take away your iPad for the rest of the day. That's a threat. It's coercion. And we think we're teaching a lesson doing this. Permissive parenting, which is something that we do not practice and never have practiced, and is not the same thing as non-authoritarian parenting. Permissive parenting would say, like, it's okay, buddy. You don't need to have any chores. It's okay. I'll just wait on you hand and foot. You do whatever you want, right? Or maybe you would not have expected a 13-year-old to contribute to chores at all in the first place. That would be permissive parenting. Non-coercive parenting would say, hey, George, we want to remember to do our chores before we play games. It would say, hey, George, did you forget to do your dusting today? Do you need a reminder? It could also be a little bit more blunt than that, like, George, dude, dusting. It's not passive aggressive. It's not manipulative. It's not assuming our child is lazy, and it's giving them the opportunity to correct and do the thing that they need to do. It's not threatening. We're not coercing them. So, there can be levels of gentleness and levels of directness when it comes to non-authoritarian parenting. And it's possible to be non-coercive and also still be somewhat authoritarian, right? To say, like, you know what? It's time to do chores. We're all going to get up and we're going to do chores now. That's authoritarian, but it's also not coercive. Non-coercive and non-authoritarian would be something like, when today will you be ready to do your chores? Now, you can say kids are just going to blow me off. They're not going to do their chores. I haven't found that to be true. But also we have a good, strong relationship with each other. And so, like, we all respect, like, hey, we're all pretty reasonable with each other. Mom's pretty reasonable. She doesn't ask a whole lot of me. She's expecting me to be a functional adult. And I recognize these things need to be done. And for me, I often remind my kids, like, hey, if you want me to do all of the chores, if that's your expectation, I will have to do that full time, and I will have less time to spend with you. I will have less time to spend earning money to buy you things that you want. I will have less time available to take you to places that you want to go. So let's think about the balance in the household where all members of the household take responsibility so that we all have time for rest, relaxation, and mom has time to help us do the things that we want to do and go to the places that we want to go. And I think that's another big aspect of non-authoritarian parenting is understanding that children need a lot of communication. It's work to parent kids. It's work. It takes a lot of communication and a lot of explaining because kids are new at being humans. They've never done it before. And so having guidance is helpful and explaining the reasons behind things, very different than our parents' generation where the reason was because I told you so. Explaining to kids gives them an understanding of, like, oh, now there's meaning attached to this thing. Or now I understand how this chore and the reason I should be doing it, how that fits into the context of my family and the rest of my life, right? Perfectly reasonable. So for us, it would be, hey, George, my dude, have you done your dusting today? No, I haven't done dusting, Mom. I'm busy, chatting with my friends online. Oh, Cool. Okay. I don't want to interrupt that thing that you're doing that's really meaningful, but I just want to remind you that it needs to be dusted sometime today. And like, let's make it clear that everything's open to negotiation in our house. Again, also exhausting, requires lots of communication, but that's an option that kids have. Like, you can renegotiate. So George might be like, you know what? I'm really having a good time chatting with my friends, and I don't think I'm going to have time for this chore today. He doesn't have to stop what he's doing, interrupt something meaningful for him. He can use his negotiation skills to be like, hey, Hal, talk to his brother, like, hey, dude, I don't want to do my dusting today. If you do my dusting for me, can I do one of your chores? Can I fold the laundry tomorrow, which I know is your chore, right? Like, they're able to negotiate, and that's a really important skill for kids to develop. And it's a skill that we use a lot in the real world. We use negotiation all the time. Not everything is set in stone. So I'm not saying like, George, that's your chore, you have to do it. If George can work out a deal with one of his siblings, or maybe he could pitch a really good deal to me, I'm open to it. It's not me dictating to him what has to happen. He's a participant in the process, right? He could say like, hey, Mom, can you take care of the dusting for me today? And in exchange, sometime in the future, you could call in a card and say like, hey, remember that time we swapped? Now it's time for me to call in my favor. And I might be open to doing that, but I also might be like, you know what, my dude, I just don't have time today. So you can work it out with one of your siblings, or you can figure out how to work it into your own schedule. That's it. There doesn't need to be arguing. There doesn't need to be manipulation. There doesn't need to be threats of punishment. And we maintain a really good, strong, healthy relationship where the kids learn skills and they learn how to relate to people in a healthy way. And like, we don't have to fight. There doesn't have to be discord and disharmony. That was helpful. This is a subject that's really complex and I think can be really difficult because in America, it's so foreign to us. Like, we aren't used to relating to children that way, especially if we've been raised in a very religious mindset. It's very much an obedience-based, authoritarian-based punishment, because kids are sinful and naughty, which no, they're not, mindset. So deprogramming from that is a long process for a lot of people. And it's also a long process in terms of our relationship with our kids. If we're thinking, how do I transition from authoritarian to non-authoritarian parenting? It takes time to build trust. It doesn't happen immediately. And I think the more you can explain to your kids, like, you know what I did in the past, I think that wasn't working for our relationship and I want to try something new. Would you be willing to partner with me on trying something new? Because I don't think it was working well for you either. And I want us both to be happy and have a good relationship and still get done the things that we need to do in life. You'd be surprised when you talk to your kids. If you're patient, if you give time to rebuild trust and you demonstrate changed behavior, that it's possible to transition from authoritarian to non-authoritarian parenting. It's possible to stop using threats and punishment, taking kids' objects and possessions away, withholding food, hitting them, grounding them. All of that doesn't have to happen anymore. And I bet if you asked your kids, they would love to have it not happen. So in the experience of some of my friends who've made that transition, kids are really motivated to partner with you in trying something new. Okay, this video is getting a little long, so I will leave it there. I hope I get this uploaded by the end of the day on Friday. My kid's great aunt is about to stop by for a visit. So we'll see if I get it out on Friday or Saturday morning. But please go follow me on TikTok. And please don't forget to click like and subscribe here. Those are ways that you can really help support the work that I do without having to give me a single penny. And it makes a really big difference. So also, please leave in the comments if you have things that you want me to talk about parenting. I would love to, because it's something that I've spent a lot of work learning and unlearning patterns of behavior. And it's something that I wish I had had more help along the way when I was doing it. And I'm so grateful for the people like Lila, my La Leche League leader, when the girls were really little. I'm so grateful for the help that I did get and the modeling that I did have. And I want to make sure that those resources are available for folks that want to try and parent this way. So yeah, I'll be back real soon. Thanks.
Okay, another question about parenting without punishment. The scenario here is you have a 2-year-old who wants to put their hand on the hot stove over and over again, and this person doesn't understand how can you address that situation without punishment. Absolutely, 2-year-olds lack impulse control. They also can't reason out the consequences of their actions. So punishing them will not work. As a parent, it's our job to keep our children safe. It's also to help them take appropriate risks in a controlled environment. But a very young child being tempted to burn themselves on a hot stove, that's our job to deal with. It has nothing to do with misbehavior or punishing a child. We talk about how the stove is hot. I might help them hold their hand above the burner so they can feel the warmth coming from it. They stand on a step stool and watch me cooking. I explain to them what would happen if they touched it.
but I'm not a one-trick pony and I've got other tools in my toolbox. I need to keep my kid away from the stove, and I also need to provide them distractions to keep them occupied so that they don't end up hurting themselves. We don't punish our kids, but do we teach consequences? Thank you, KBV, for this question. I am so excited to talk about this. We don't punish our kids. We're non-authoritarian parents, and my kids are 21, 19, almost 16, and almost 13. They've never been spanked. They've never been grounded. They've never been put in timeout, and we don't punish them in any way, shape, or form. You may be surprised to learn that a lot of cultures don't punish their children. Punishment and bad behavior is very much a Christian concept. I think it can be really difficult, especially for Americans who are very much enculturated with this idea that children are sinful, children misbehave, children are naughty, they are up to no good, to understand that that's not actually how kids are. And I think it's also doubly compounded by the fact that many Americans know very little about child development. We know very little about what normal childlike behavior is at different stages of a child's development over the years. So many things kids are punished for and are perceived in American culture as being naughtiness are actually just natural, normal behaviors that are aligned with the stage of development of that child. Now, I can talk about this more in another video, but I don't believe in obedience. I don't believe in the concept of disobedience when it comes to kids. So we don't coerce and control our children. We don't make threats against them. So kids experience the natural consequences of their behavior. And maybe this is also a topic for another video because a lot of people misunderstand what natural consequences are. But if we're going to the park and I say, hey, Sally, looks like rain, don't forget to bring your rain jacket, and Sally forgets her rain jacket, she might get wet. Another example of a natural consequence would be you don't wash your mug out. Next time you go to get a drink, your mug is in the sink and you have to wash it before you refill it with tea. But I think most parents in America view natural consequences as like natural punishment, the universe punishing you and teaching you a lesson. And what's much more effective is modeling for our kids how we want to be treated and explaining to them, having conversations with them about how the universe works. And our expectations as parents have got to align with a child's development. There's nothing wrong with reminding a child. Children need lots and lots of repetition to learn lessons. So there is an extent to which my kids experience natural consequences. You stay up really late one night, the next morning, if you have an early appointment, you're going to be really overtired and you're going to have to go through the day being really tired and grouchy. And I realize it's too much to get into in a TikTok video, but I think we could get away from the idea of teaching consequences at all as the goal of our parenting or the mechanism through which we teach children how to be and how to function. So I hope that explained it a little bit. Probably stirred up a lot more questions than it answered. Boy, oh boy, me talking about how we don't have any punishments in our family really set some folks off. First off, we don't do no consequences. We do no artificial consequences and no punishment. My kids definitely experience the natural consequences of their behavior. But let's talk about how we as adults enter into voluntary agreements where we say we will abide by a set of rules. For example, in our workplace, when we enter the library or a store, there are conventions and rules that we say, hey, if we choose to be here, we agree to abide by your rules. My kids are familiar with that social contract as well, and they choose to engage in it in many ways. Now, my kids didn't go to public school and they don't have detention in college, but my children do voluntarily agree to enter into the contract with the college that they are enrolled in. If they don't like the rules, they don't have to go there. I realize that the way we're parenting our kids is unusual compared to most American families, and I'm happy to keep answering honest questions. When I said that we're non-authoritarian parents, and that means that we don't hit, including spanking our children, but we also don't punish them, including grounding them and taking away things that belong to them, this person seemed a little confused by what I meant. So they said, you make them work to earn money and buy things then? No, I don't. But my kids' possessions do belong to them, and I don't have the right to come in and take them away. That is a choice that we have made as parents to respect the dignity and autonomy of our children. Kids get gifts from family members and friends. Those belong to them, not to me. But I'm not just talking about their birthday and Christmas presents, and I'm not just talking about things that they've chosen to spend gift money on themselves. I'm also talking about the things I provide for them. Their clothes, their toys, their craft supplies, their makeup, their jewelry, etc., their bicycles, etc., etc. And I know this may seem strange because we live in a culture of authoritarian parenting here in America, and parents often think they have the right to take away something of a child's as a form of punishment to teach them a lesson. But if my husband does something I don't like, I don't get to go take away his phone and hide it from him.
I don't get to lock up his Magic the Gathering cards until he makes amends. If my best friend pisses me off, I don't get to go change his Netflix password and not give it back until he's fixed things with me or learned his lesson. So not only is withholding our kids' possessions, or I would argue not withholding but taking their possessions away, not an effective form of teaching a lesson, it's also not what we do as adults when we have healthy relationships with each other. It's inherently coercive. It's also very dehumanizing. I mean, if you've ever been the victim of a burglary and had someone come into your space and take things that don't belong to them, that belong to you, it feels terrible. It's a violation, and that's how I view taking away my kids' possessions. Again, I know it's really common in American parenting. Not only to view this as appropriate behavior by parents, but also to basically view your kids' possessions as essentially yours and not really theirs. So again, I would go back to what are we ultimately trying to teach kids when they don't behave in a way that we want or expect? And how do we think that our choice of punishment is going to get us there? And more than that, how is our choice of punishment going to damage the relationship that we have with our child? So that going forward, trust and communication is harder than ever. Respecting our kids' autonomy and who they are as individual human beings instead of property or extensions of ourselves includes not taking away things that belong to them because we're mad and because we want to punish them.
Do people like your kids? Be honest. This comment was left on a video where I talked about how we don't force our kids to apologize. I've got 4 kids, ages 21, 19, almost 16, and almost 13, and we are non-authoritarian, non-coercive parents. First off, Rose, I'm always honest here, and I'm happy to talk about my parenting style. But first I want to make it clear, the goal of my parenting is not to raise likable children. One of the benefits of raising kids to know their own minds, to be self-directed, to question authority, to treat themselves and other people with integrity, is that they're not actually that concerned about being likable. Bet you didn't think that's how I was going to answer this question, is it? This is one of the things that we've talked about a lot, especially with our daughters, because girls, especially in American society, are enculturated to be sweet and likable and to compromise their integrity in order to do so. So we've raised our kids, and I've lived my life personally where this is not a goal. I don't need to curry favor. I don't need to pander. I don't need to be liked by everybody. And I think that modeling that for my kids has been a really good thing. Again, especially for girls, those gender roles hit real hard. Girls are supposed to be likable. They're supposed to be approachable. They're supposed to compromise who they are in order to gain the approval of other people. The goal has always been to get my children to understand the dignity and humanity in other people and in themselves and act accordingly. So I get that you're chomping at the bit for me to answer this question, but it's actually irrelevant. It's not the point of my parenting. I'm raising my kids to like and love themselves, to care for themselves, each other, and the community. Being likable, compromising who they are in order to gain approval from toxic people, engaging in popularity contests, not even part of the equation.